All right, a warm welcome again during this orientation week for the new students in the Department of Computer Science. My name is still Tim Neubacher, and what I'm going to do now, I'm trying to introduce a little bit about intercultural experience in Germany. So the idea is to raise the awareness for intercultural differences, because we will encounter a lot of different students from different areas, from different countries, in different study programs, and so on and so forth. And the idea is to overcome potential problems by enhancing the awareness and the reflectiveness when you think about cultural differences, right? And it's about studying and also, in general, life in Germany. And at the end, there will be a short quiz where you can actually, hopefully, guess the right answers after my talk. Let's start. So, what is culture? Well, essentially, culture is almost everything. It's what's meant by civilization. It's the code of conduct. It's the different manners people have. It's the do's and don'ts in society, but also bound to religion, history, language, traditions, the whole environment, your personal identification, similarities, the recognition of all those factors, and so on and so forth. So it's really a bunch of things, or let's be honest, the whole socialization that happened and is going to happen, and everything you get in touch with is part of culture. So that's quite a big thing to talk about, first of all. And the problem is that only a small part is usually visible, right? These are usually the cultural aspects that are conscious. So, for example, music, specific arts of storytelling or dancing or something like that. The way of greeting people, right? Or for example, whether you wear a mask if you're ill to secure the others or not, right? There's a big difference, for example, in Asian countries compared to Germany. At least it was earlier. And then there's a lot of hidden, subconscious cultural concepts. Social interaction, specific types of humor, for example. And I think I once read there's, I think, only one thing that's common for every person in the world, and that's laughter. I think that's actually the only cultural sign that's valid for every society. It means joy. And not even crying is the same for everyone, right? So a very small thing that's definitely identical for everyone, only very few things that's conscious and visible directly, and a lot of other things. Okay, so I will encounter cultural shocks then, definitely, because I don't know much about the different cultures, right? I know what's visible, I know probably a little bit more due to personal contact or experience, but there's a lot of things I can't see, and I will encounter on the fly. And that usually leads to cultural shock. That doesn't have to be that hard, right? Sometimes it's just something you find a little bit silly or funny or whatever, and then it's fine. Sometimes it's a little bit more problematic, let's say, because you will raise different reactions on the other side. And there's always, of course, the question, what experience have you already made, and how have you dealt with the same? We're doing this now mostly for the stream and the recordings, and we have 3. Now we have 4. Non-organizational students in the room who can answer those questions, and the problem for them is they now have to answer all the questions. So any example for an experience you made with cultural shock when you arrived in Germany, for example, you or in different countries for the German students, anything that was a bit surprising, strange or something? If not, it's completely fine as well. Thanks. The example was a German student who was in the United States, and the waiter always dropped by at the table asking if they wanted something else and whatever, which is not that common, at least in Germany, right? And it feels a bit pushy, right? True. I encounter the same in different countries as well. How have you dealt with the situation? Have you just ignored the same? Right, so he ignored it more or less, and it was just feel strange, and that's exactly what you can do, of course. You can just ignore some things like that, right? On the other hand, what you can also do, you can just get used to it and probably even try to follow the different culture, right? I will get back to that later on, because there's a problem with following different cultures, right? But it's really important, and I think that's actually what you should always keep in mind then. You should always actively participate in foreign cultures and get to know, when it comes down to studies, the local students, for example, and the other way around, the international students, in order to get more information. Because the more you know, the less shock you will actually have, right? You should always be aware of your own culture. So just imitating usually doesn't make sense, right? So be sure that you keep your own values and attitudes, because that's why you feel in the way you feel, and why you act in the way you act, right? Don't lose that, but try probably to adjust to the different culture in the best way possible. Try to find out why people are acting as they do. I mean, there's usually some kind of explanation in behind, and it's way more complicated to follow a different culture or to get used to a different culture if you don't know why they're actually doing the same, right? Because then it seems just random and different. But if you know the reasons, it's usually quite helpful. Try to embrace the different perspective. Try to figure out why, and then try to understand why the people or this specific person acts in a specific way. From Anais Nin, there's this citation on the slide: we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. And that's true. There's only a subjective point of view, right? And we always reflect our own culture into the world and back. And therefore always try to get the point of view of the other side in order to reduce cultural shocks. And also reflect your emotions. So if you're disturbed by something, it might actually be you with the problem and not the other side as well, right? Because you are used to different things, but it might be quite common in different countries. Said that as a general introduction, we are now coming down to more specific fields of cultures. For example, universities in Germany. They are mainly not private. There are usually no high fees, also not for international students. And that's very specific. I think that almost any other country in the world has at least some higher fees for international students. The Netherlands, Sweden, Switzerland, USA, UK, whatsoever, right? So it's a very specific thing for German universities. There's a so-called freedom of science, and that's also something that's really different to other university systems. Specifically with for example, in the US, again, the department structure they have. We call ourselves department, but we have a completely different structure. And with the freedom of science, there's almost nothing we can force our lecturers to do. So it's in a lot of things, a lot of cases, it's their decision how to give lectures, how to organize that, and whom to accept for a thesis, for example, and so on. And also for the students, a lot more freedom usually than on the other side, to go for different individual tracks, for example. So a lot of freedom in our system, making it a bit more complicated from time to time, definitely, but on the other hand, a little bit more flexible as well. And we have a strong participation of the students. Like, for example, in the orientation days, when the whole technique, the organization, everything is handled by the Students' Council in our department. But there's also all the parliaments and boards the students are active within. So we have a lot of participation on behalf of the students, actually, and from the students themselves. And that's really helpful to identify problems, really helpful for us when it comes down to capacity and. And all the students get a better insight as well into all the organizational structures and issues. That leads to several different things, like you have to be quite autonomous in your studies, right? There's no all-round service, for example, as we have no department structure and therefore not the same kind of funding and money as, for example, the US universities have, so that you really have a lot of mentors and student advisors only responsible for that. So you have to be self-responsible, right? It's up to you whether you get the right information. It's up to you whether you select the right combination of courses. It's up to you to get in touch if you have questions or problems, right? We, of course, will try to help you in case you drop by or get in touch with us, but if you don't, you will just run into problems at some point, probably. So, use the consultation hours and other possibilities to gather information as soon as possible and as complete as possible, just in order to not miss out anything important, right? If you don't need it afterwards, it's completely fine, right? It might have been unnecessary then, but the biggest problem is the other way around. If you don't have the information and then run into problems, it gets stressy. Also, difference in the course types, for example. In most other countries, you will always have a combination of lectures and seminar parts or lab parts. In our department, at least, we're dividing the same into different areas, right? We usually have the distinction between lectures and seminars and labs. Sometimes you will see a combination from the same group, a lecture, and based on the lecture, a lab and a seminar, but you don't have to combine them. You can go for another seminar or lab instead, for example. Bigger freedom, again, probably not the best idea in every case, right? And a really big difference is it's not about reproducing. So there are several countries in the world or areas where it's more or less about repeating what you actually learned, learning by heart, for example, as well. And that's not quite common, at least not at German universities. You usually have to learn something by heart, you have to repeat something because that's the basic of everything else that comes after. But you have to use the same and transfer your knowledge into new tasks, for example. And that's definitely a different kind of learning. The difference is about the question, how does something work, is repeating. That's easy. I mean, how an algorithm works, you can just follow the instruction and that's fine, right? Why something works in a way is the interesting question, and that's research. And we're research oriented. Therefore, a lot of transfer of knowledge required as well, leading to a different kind of preparation required to pass the exam in a good way, for example. It's topic and critics oriented. So it's not it's always in small packages, let's say, on specific topics as well. No copy and paste or whatever, right? In some other countries, it's an honor, actually, to be copied. Here, it's sometimes forbidden, right? So quite a difference. Same holds true for quotation rules. Make sure to always, if you have to submit something in written form, to use the right quotation rules. Otherwise, you will run into big problems, usually. Probably, if it occurs several times, you might be forced to exmatriculate. So that's the hardest problem you can run in with that. So try to figure out what's to be used, how to proceed. How to get to know all these informations? Well, get in touch with the locals and ask. That's the easiest way, right? They should know about the same. If not, try to ask someone else. In the library, in the Mensa, during your sports, in the courses, online, on the streets. Probably not just fetch someone on the street and just ask random questions. That might be a cultural shock for this person then. But there's an arbitrary number of possibilities to get in touch with locals. Try to do the same, because that's where you can identify also local differences. It's not the case that the Germans are all the same, right? I mean, if you encounter people from the northern part, like Hamburg, Bremen or whatever, or from the countryside, or from the southern parts in Bavaria, for example, you will identify cultural differences quite easy and fast. So therefore, it really makes sense to get in touch with the locals. A lot of slides, so no questions to be answered. Good for you. There are different types of accommodations. That's also specifically interesting for students, specifically for students in our area, because you will have encountered this already, most likely at least. Not that many possibilities left to get an accommodation. Quite expensive from time to time. So the basic three types are a so-called Wohngemeinschaft, a shared apartment, more or less, right? Where some flat members. A studio apartment, meaning a very short, very small flat, usually just one room with a small cooking area, a little bathroom, and that's more or less it. And a private apartment, and I doubt that everyone can afford a private apartment in Darmstadt. Or if you even would get one, actually, because the decision lies with the landlords. And students tend to not have that much money. So the security for the landlord is reduced. Plus, as always, there will be some stupid people, and if you have the wrong surname, you won't get the flat, for example. Ignore them. Try to find something else. You don't want to live there anyways. Okay, where to search for an accommodation? Because it's very rare to find something. It's easier if you're already here, because then you can also look out for spreadsheets somewhere and whatever. But of course, there are the dormitories, Wohnheime, very few places usually, some more people dropping by. But also people who probably already know this talk. They're usually furnished, along waiting lists, so different things that have to kept in mind for the same. You have to, sometimes you can apply directly, sometimes you have to apply via waiting list, via the Studienwerk here in Darmstadt, and so on. There's a private market where you can just look up whether something is offered and directly get in touch with the landlord or the previous people living there. No, the people previously living there. That's tenant. Yeah, thanks. Tenant. Missing word. Thank you. And then there is the real estate agency. If you can get around this, probably do. There has been a change of law a few years ago that the landlords now have to pay the real estate agents if the contract is done via them. Yet that's not always true. And they will get around and probably even raise more money for the flats in order to get the money back. And usually the flats are then unfurnished and you have to buy all the furniture as well, which can be quite expensive, right? But there are, of course, different mixers and differences as well. Look it up, get in touch with the locals, ask them. That's the best idea, right? There is a university lawyer. So if you're in doubt about contracts for the same or anything, try to get in touch either, for example, with the AStA, or directly there's a possibility to get legal advice on such things as well. Try to clarify it before signing a contract, definitely. Some of them are a bit strange from time to time. Most are most likely quite fine. But it depends on the landlords, of course, and probably also their legal knowledge and whatever. And so if you're in doubt, try to get that cross-checked, right? Usually you have an annual rent increase. That's quite common, or probably biannual or whatever. There's also a limit. They can only raise that up to the average price per square meter in the same area and whatever. But it's not always easy to calculate that and to cross-check that. So there will be some rent increase from time to time usually. You will usually either have a limited contract or an unlimited one. If you sign a limited contract, make sure to search for a substitution early enough, because it takes time. And if your contract runs out and you don't have anything else to live, you're homeless, first of all. Not the best idea, probably. And then sometimes you can renew the contract, right? This depends on the specific contract. Right. And then you sometimes have to deposit some money as well as a security measurement for the landlord. It's usually somewhat like 1, 2, 3 monthly rents in total. And if, in the best case, if you leave the flat or the room or whatever, and everything's fine so far, you will get back your money. If you destroy the flat and leave, they will just keep the money. So make sure that if you destroy the flat, it's way more expensive than your deposit. That's, of course, not the recommendation. And then, additionally, you have a monthly payment. It's very rare that you have a quarter payment or a half-year payment or even a yearly payment. You should definitely get this contract checked via a lawyer then, because usually it's a monthly payment. And then in the rent you have something like the Warmmiete and the Kaltmiete and the Nebenkosten and whatever. And you should receive something after the first year at least, or after your contract, a summary of what you paid for which part actually. So it's gas, electricity usually, it's heating, sometimes it's television, cleaning, trash collection, property taxes, and whatever. So it's a bunch of things one has to pay for. But on the other hand, a lot of things are then done by done by someone else, right? So you don't have to bring your trash to the missing word again. Müllhalde. The garbage was? Yeah, the dump, thanks, dump. If they're not in strike, they will just collect that from your home, and so on and so forth. I will get back to garbage later on, because that's very specific in Germany as well. And there will be some regulations. In your contract, sometimes you will find a letter in your stairways, for example, explaining all the rules. So if you're allowed to wash and dry your laundry in the basement or in the flat, usually not in the flat, if it's possible to store your bicycle in the basement or outside or not, if you're allowed to have pets, for example, sometimes you need a written permission of the landlord to have a pet. Then if you have damages of anything, actually, first of all, get in touch with the landlords, specifically if it's coming down to gas, water, or electrical lines, because that's something you shouldn't solve on your own anyways, and it's quite expensive sometimes to get that done, and responsible is the landlord, because it's really part of the structural part of the flat, of your accommodation. It's usually not allowed, at least not all the time through, to have a barbecue or something on your balcony, for example, because it might disturb other people. But sometimes it's completely fine to do the same, so that's a very specific thing to clarify, probably. And believe me, if your neighbors are not fine with the same, you will get to know directly. That's the same reason why you should avoid loud noises between 1 p.m. and 3 p.m. because that's when Germans tend to sleep. My grandfather did. That's the only person I personally know. Anyway, and of course in the night. And also all day on Sunday, because it's a very holy day in Germany. I'm coming back to Sunday and shops later on as well. But of course, it's up to your neighbors as well, right? So if you want to celebrate a party because, I don't know, you got 40. That was my last round. Then you can just ask everyone in the same house, for example, and just inform them, tell them it might get a little bit more noisy, and then most likely it will be fine. But people are different, so clarify that, and if they don't agree, and you're still noisy, then it's going to happen the same thing then in my shared flat several times. At some point, some policeman will drop by and will inform you in a very polite way that you're too noisy. Problem is, the law has changed as well, and they could take away your sound system directly. Probably don't. Or be very friendly, then usually they say just be less noisy, and then they leave again. It's not a good idea to have them 2-3 times in the same night. All right. Oh, what we actually did once, not a recommendation. Please don't necessarily follow this one. We thought, well, they've dropped by every time we had a party in our flat. So, and now they're allowed to confiscate, to take away our system as well. Let's call them in advance and tell them that we're going to have a party, give them a phone number so they can call us if it's too noisy, and so they don't have to drop by, also meaning that they can't take anything from us, right? So that was the basic idea. So we called the police station in Darmstadt, explained the situation, and the guy on the phone was like, oh, okay, that's actually quite cool. It's okay, give me your phone number. So we provided the mobile number of our flat member who was in Berlin that time. We were louder than ever else. No one dropped by. No one called her actually in Berlin. I think they were quite happy that we're so reflective and whatever, and thought probably it's just the bad neighbors, or I don't know. So it worked out for us, but I think if you all try the same, I will run into problems and you as well. So probably don't. I actually don't think that he noted down the mobile number anyways. But it worked out, probably by accident. So back to the garbage. Oh, okay, online questions. A license for? Do I need to have a license for my pet, for actually a snake, a python? You don't have to have a license in that, but you have to keep your pet according to the rules for the specific type of pet, definitely. I don't think that you have to get a license for a python, but I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, that's what I already, right? I mean, yes, you have to have the allowance to have a pet in your flat. I think it was probably a bit more about the legal issues behind. Because if you don't care for your pet in the way it should be and someone encounters the same, you will run into big problems. So with the python, it's more or less keep it warm. Very lazy animals usually, feed them on regular basis. That's completely fine. But besides, yeah, you have to definitely ask your landlord. And I'm not sure whether everyone accepts a snake. Ah, you mean racists? Okay, essentially that's it. So it's about the landlords who won't rent to people with the wrong name. You will encounter racists across the world, and some people are just stupid, and it happens also, for example, to Germans with the wrong surname, right? And that's a stupid behavior, and but yeah, nothing you can do about that because it's their decision whom to rent the flat to, right? So sometimes you won't even hear back from such people if you apply for a flat or shared room or something. Yeah, that's just how it is. So as sad as it is sometimes. Thanks. Thanks. Right, okay, thanks. Thanks. It doesn't necessarily mean that you contacted a racist if you don't hear back, if you apply for something like that, or anywhere else. That's not the way it works. Of course, thank you. They just receive a lot of requests, a lot of spare rooms and so on. So it's quite common that you don't get any information back. But sometimes it's just about this, and in that case, it's sad, but that's the way how it is. Right, thank you, of course, making it clear. We also have a lot of people here in Darmstadt and in Germany being no racists, right? And I hope really, really, and I strongly believe way more than we actually have racists, right? But sometimes it's just the case. All right, any further questions? Garbage or disposal classifications. I've been in Japan a few years ago, and that's even more crazy. In our hotel we had a disposal classification document, actually, several pages, and I actually wanted to look up the garbage dump because I was like, okay, if it's that crazy, even more crazy than we are in Germany, then how does one of the dumps actually work, right? But my father was not willing to join me, so we visited a temple or something. I don't know. Anyhow, you will encounter several different colors on the garbage bins or across the city and whatever. For example, metal and specific plastics, yellow usually, but it differs across Germany from time to time in different communities. Paper, green instead of blue as it's stated here usually, but also in some areas blue. Organic disposals, green, or in most cases brown nowadays. Everything else, gray, sometimes red, because the landlords are paying, for example, for weekly disposal, bi-weekly disposal, monthly disposal, and then they identify whether they actually take your trash by the color of your trash bin. So a lot of things to take care of. And then there are trash days, and you can actually request that they fetch something like your furniture, so if it's bigger. Don't mix it up with electricity things, with electrical stuff, like television or radio or computer or whatever. That's a different type of garbage again. What you can do as well, you can just bring it to the dump, actually. And there are recycling centers as well. So specifically television and whatever, it might make sense if it's just a little bit to directly dispose it on your own. It's not that expensive, that's completely fine. If you have a lot of things, furniture, whatever, you should call for the disposal system to fetch that on your street. You are only allowed to put it on the street, on the boardwalk, I think from 6 p.m. on, officially. and it has to be there directly in the morning because they might drop by at 6 a.m. or whatever to fetch it. But you can look that up online, you can look that up usually via the city or community government system. Sometimes the local disposal companies, agencies, whatever. And then you will encounter some containers for glass, also ordered into different colors, and that's actually recurring to the color of the glass. So only throw green bottles into the green glass disposal bin. Because otherwise, I don't know what happens. Otherwise, actually, to be honest, I actually don't know. Thank you. All other colors, like blue, also into the brown bin. Does anyone know what actually happens with the wrong type of glass? Okay, yes, what? Okay, there's also an automatic sorting out system apparently, cameras, whatever, so why do you have to order that on your own anyways then? Because otherwise it wouldn't work, too much things to sort out and so on. Okay. Okay. So apparently the cameras are quite good, but not that good. If we don't pre-sort it out previously, it won't work out, essentially. But, right, yeah, what, Deckel? Cap, thanks. Remove the caps, definitely. And there's usually a small trash bin besides these glass bins, where you can then throw in the caps. I have no idea what you should do if there's something on the bottle you can't remove. Most likely you're not allowed to throw in the bottle then into the glass bins. Then again, coming back to the other ones, the gray ones for everything else. Ah ja, wenn du es nicht trennen kannst, schmeiß es halt in den Restmüll. So, kann man das rausschneiden? Egal. All right. So you can see, yeah. A good question from online. Can I recolor my trash bins? No, you can't, and I think you would actually pay a fee because the trash bins are delivered by the city, the community, and they are rented by the landlords, actually. So it's not your own thing to have usually. No. Huh? Right, right. There's sometimes even a chip inside the bins. So don't throw them away. Don't move them with you if you move to somewhere else. It's not the best idea, definitely. No. You can ask your landlord whether it's possible to switch to another system, probably, but then you will have to pay more rent, most likely, because that's included in the Nebenkosten. All right. Any further questions? All right. Another very specific thing, and I'm actually at the moment with my girlfriend. I'm a little bit fighting against this health system in Germany because there's a surgery required and so on and so forth. Believe me, stay healthy is the best idea, definitely. Anyways, but also, so there's health insurance. There's a governmental health insurance system, right? And they are taking care of, actually financing hospital care if required. There are registered doctors, medical doctors. Also, basic dental care is included, and so on. Sometimes some extra thingies, but this depends on the specific health insurance agency, actually, what's included. You have to pay for that, so it's mandatory. Everyone, greetings to the US, everyone is required to have a health insurance in Germany. We are such communists. Sorry for that. And it can be quite expensive. Usually there are, for students, there are specific accounts possible, a little bit less expensive. I think I'm paying roughly 900 something euros per month now, because if you get hired, it depends on your income actually. And no, I'm not earning that much money. It's just expensive. Then there's also the possibility to have a private health insurance agency and whatever. That's a good idea if you're young and if you don't have much money, but at some point you're getting older and probably ill, and then it's quite costly, so it's not always the best idea. Sometimes you don't have the chance to select it because you're working in a specific area, and then you're bound to specific health insurance agencies and whatever. Usually there's a limit. Most likely an age limit, how long you can stay in the health insurance for students. All right, so thank you. 14 Fachsemester, and again there's no good translation for the same, study-related semesters probably, and an age of 30 years. So if you exceed either or, you have to switch to some other, at least some other policy. Not necessarily another health insurance agency. Right. Sometimes it's possible under specific circumstances that your health insurance from your home country is accepted as well. You can get that checked by a member of the TK Health Insurance Agency. And the responsible person is located at the university. I think it's Ms. Memminger at the moment. And you should have received information about that during your application and whatever, if you're an international student. There have to be some specifics covered, like how much money there is as a deposit for specific cases and whatever. And if everything's fine, you will get an acceptance from the TK, and then it's fine to stay with your own health insurance agency. If not, you may have to get one on your own. The International Students Service is going to help you with that if required. Right, we have some more generic medical doctors, general practitioners, Hausärzte usually called. That doesn't mean that they're in your home. That's probably going to be expensive if they are going to get to your home. It's just a random name. They have Hausärzte, and then they will find a lot of specialists, right? Like everywhere else, cardiologists, dermatologists, dental, medical doctors, and. You usually need some kind of Überweisung, transfer certificate from your Hausarzt to the specific one. Besides, it's urgent and whatever, right? And in that case, you should go to the hospital anyway. If you're not sure, get in touch with the locals. Really, because it's not always easy to identify where to get in touch, with whom to get in touch, in which way to get in touch sometimes as well, and so on and so forth. Right, a recommendation. You need a recommendation for the different medical doctors. You also need the same if you want to go into hospital. Besides, it's an urgency, right? If it's an urgency, directly go into the hospital and get your treatment. If there's a planned operation or whatever, you need a recommendation from your Hausarzt for the hospital and so on and so forth. In case of emergencies, to call the right number. 112 for medical emergencies, for example, accidents and everything like that. 110 is the police, so you can call both numbers. That's completely fine as an international student. But it's a little bit faster probably to call the 112 if you're in need for an ambulance, for example. But That's a slight difference. Always have your Krankenversicherungskarte with you. So a health insurance ID card, right? Always have it with you because otherwise it's at least going to be way more complicated if you have an emergency or afterwards. Just keep it in your pocket the whole time through. That's definitely something important. Anything on health insurance? The map where the... Okay, cool, thanks. Okay, there's a map for the general medical doctors still accepting new patients because a lot of them are just crowded as hell. And there will be a map available somewhere, right? Perfect. Okay, thanks. Good hint. If you haven't, let's say, not as hazardous emergency, for example, if you're ill, if you have pain, but it's not really an emergency, at least you don't think so. There's also something like ärztlicher Bereitschaftsdienst, doctor on duty. Okay. Here in Darmstadt, located at the Klinikum in Darmstadt, and a separate building, and so on, makes sense, definitely. And if it's really an emergency, you will directly get recommended into the hospital then, right? (116, 117 oder was? Okay, there's a phone number 116, 117 if you're not really sure whom to get in touch with directly or where to go to. Perfect, thanks. Do I have something? No, I don't. Okay, yeah. Other insurances, thanks. Good recommendation, thank you. I'm not sure if there's a country in the world that has more possibilities to get insurance than we have in Germany. You can get insurance for your bike, your pet, specific ones for your own, for your health, additional dental insurances or other insurances, your car, whatever. For some, you actually have to have an insurance, right? Like your car. It has to be insured. For some, it might be a really good idea in case of an accident or whatever. For some, it depends, probably. You should definitely, if you rent something, for example, you should have a Haftpflichtversicherung. Not sure how to translate that. It's basically covering accidents. Nope. Haftpflichtversicherung ist nicht gesetzlich vorgeschrieben für alle. Liability insurance, thank you. So you should, specifically if you rent something, but in general it's a good idea to have a liability insurance. Really, in Germany it's really helpful, but it's not mandatory to have one for each and everyone. They are not that costly, really. So I really recommend a liability insurance. Yes? I can repeat the phone number 116 117. Check 116 117. Okay, perfect. But there's an arbitrary number of insurances, really. If you have kids, if you have pets, if you have a bike, if you have a motorcycle, a car, if you want to get over insured, it's not a problem at all in Germany. On the other hand, some are really, really helpful. Depends on your personal situation. Some are mandatory, you can't get around. The liability insurance is definitely a good thing. If you travel a lot, some additional travel insurances, for example, and so on, might actually be helpful. Huh? Kinder. Yeah, remember the word Reiserücktrittsversicherung. Everyone is nodding in the room. Okay, fair enough. Any other questions or points for the insurance thingies? Okay. Mobile contracts. Probably the most expensive country in the world when it comes down to mobile phoning. There are two different general things to have: either prepaid, so you pay as you go, right? Some usually have a limit then, a deposit, and you have to load money onto your account in order to be able to use that afterwards. Sometimes you can just pay a small card somewhere and then activate the number, and then it's fine. Sometimes you have to pay money, sometimes whatever. There are small differences, but it's prepaid. And then you have the contract, and this actually the standard length of these contracts is 2 years. So it's quite a long time. And sometimes it starts free, and then you have a monthly fee. Plus, you have additional costs if you exceed, for example, what's free in your contract. So make sure to really observe all the details and to read the contracts in detail before you decide for a specific mobile contract. That's really important because there are a lot of differences. Specifically, for example, if you travel across the European countries a lot, it's capped now, but it's not working out that good always, and it can be very expensive, and you can just spare money if you go for the right contract for you. If you don't know how to identify which possibilities there are and whatsoever, get in touch with the locals. I am actually that old, I just used the one I already had. It is definitely expensive, but I don't care. I'm just lazy. I mean, if you exactly, if you have to pay that many money for the health insurance, no. If it's just taking care of too many things. You can do so many things in Germany with all the contracts and whatever. You can switch the contracts. Sometimes it's possible to switch the contracts, and the new company will pay the difference to the old one for some time. And way too complicated for me personally. I'm old. I'm going to be like my father. We always had this phone. No. Make sure to select the right one and probably decide whether it's easy to get out again, if applicable for you. Besides, everything's a little bit more detailed, and you have to actually decide that on your own, on individual base, unfortunately. Any general recommendation? Does everyone agree? The suggestion was take one from the discounters, so the discounter supermarkets actually, because yes, there are also prepaid or not prepaid contracts from the supermarkets and whatever offered as well. True. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, another recommendation, probably, if suitable for you, there are contracts that are extended always by 1 month. Sometimes it's a little bit more expensive in general, but it's way easier to get out fast if you want to go for something else, for example. Plus, there are some extra packages you can book onto your account, for example. A flexible system, and as always, way too complicated probably, and it's not easy to get around. Get used to it. You're in Germany now. Okay. Another thing that's an interesting topic. We were well known for our working public transportation system. And people across the world still think that it's that good. Yeah, thank you for traveling with Deutsche Bahn. It's okay-ish. You have a lot of lines. Your benefit as a student here is that you have your semester ticket and you can just travel around with specific trains and buses, not all of them, for free, because you already paid for the same. Only in the RMV system plus the extended Waben, just to mention a word you will encounter at some point. But it's almost all Hessia, besides a little part of the north and a little bit to the south of Hessia as well, and Rhineland-Pfalz and so on. You can just travel around freely with your semester ticket. You can also buy group tickets where you can take up to 5 people or up to 4 people with you, so 5 people in total usually. There are day tickets, weekly tickets, specific tickets with a reservation and. And coming up, the 49 euro ticket. Not sure whether everything's already regulated. Okay, so you can buy your 49 euro tickets, and I think you can then use also, I'm not sure, ICE und sowas wahrscheinlich nicht, ne? Okay, so not the fast trains, because you always have to pay more for faster trains in Germany, but the basic public transportation is covered, I think, then across Germany, right? Across Germany. So that's actually quite fine. So it's not that expensive for some purposes. It can get really expensive. And it's not that punctual anymore, as usually. So compared, for example, to Switzerland or Japan, it has been a little better earlier. But just a small example. The plan, the German public transportation system, so the German, die Deutsche Bahn, actually uses is the transfer of passengers for each stop of a train, regardless which train, lasts 1 minute. That's how they calculate their schedule, roughly. Have you ever encountered in Germany the situation that it only takes 1 minute for all passengers to get out and get in again? Okay, on public holidays probably. Yeah, or in the middle of the night, right. If a train runs in the middle of the night. But they usually have at least a few minutes delay nowadays. Yeah. 5 minutes or something. That's completely fine. Just chill a bit. Most likely the train will come. If not, at some point you will get an announcement or a display somewhere that it's cancelled, and then you have enough time to search for something else. Short hint from the auditorium, so the maximum delay, that's okay for the Deutsche Bahn, is 50 minutes. If it's more than 50 minutes, more than 60 minutes, we will get at least partly your money back. I'm not sure about all the money. Anyhow, that's the reason why they usually, if it exceeds the 50 minutes, they will just skip the train. And then you have to take the next one, and because they don't have to pay you back your money if the train is skipped totally and not delayed. So if okay, it's less money they have to pay back. Okay, thanks. Okay, yeah, just test me in my English. Okay, student just mentioned the if you buy a specific ticket for a specific commute, there's often the so-called Zugbindung. So you're bound to a specific train actually, and it's not possible to use one in advance or later on or whatever. So you're actually bound to this specific train. And if you can't take it, you lost your ticket, most likely. There are exceptions though, as always, and. Yeah, not the easiest system as well, again. Press what? Okay, thanks. There's a benefit if a train is skipped. And you have had this specific ticket, then you will get a ticket where you can use actually every train for 24 hours. For 24 hours. Hope that a train still runs at this moment. Let's say at least it's interesting to get around with the German public transportation system. It could be boring as well. Take it as a challenge. Yeah, please go to the board bistro. Num num. Okay, going out. Bars, pubs, nightclubs, of course, cinema, theater. For Darmstadt, you can look up parties and concerts, for example, via party. Okay, wait, there's. Does the semester ticket work for ICE? No. That was easy. Even possible with my English. All right. Coming back to going out. You can find a lot of possibilities to go out via Partyamt, Facebook groups, and so on and so forth. Just try to figure out what I'm interested for, what you are interested for in that case, and what's probably the best location for you to get in touch with people with similar interests and so on. Differences, of course, people are allowed to drink alcohol way earlier in Germany because that's the allowed drug in Germany. For example, alcohol with not that much percentage of alcohol in it from 16 years old. Greetings to the yes again. And 18, if you're actually then allowed to drink every alcohol when you're 18. So a lot of very young people also in the bars and pubs at the night. Don't wonder, that's completely fine, usually. A lot of possibilities. As I started with, get around as much as possible, specifically at the beginning, to get to know other people and locals. And now, German stereotypes. Things people think how Germans are. Germans are direct, probably even a bit harsh. Straight shooters, no diplomatic discussions, goal-oriented interaction, not really much talking around, getting right to the point. Everyone who knows me knows this is definitely not true for every German. I tend to talk way too much, and I hopefully can be somewhat diplomatic, so it's completely fine. Oh, not that much time. How much time do I have? That's not... Okay. Germans love rules, that's true. Okay, that one is at least half true. So we love rules, organizations, and structures. That's completely fine. There's a government office called Ordnungsamt, which literally translates to Office of Order. And for example, most Germans tend to stop at a red traffic light for pedestrians, even though no car can be seen wherever. It depends on the age, where actually you're located, and so on and so forth. But in general, that's not untrue, right? Right, because there are a lot of fees as well if you are not holding on the rules. Punctuality. Early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable. That is also at least half true. So try to be punctual. There are exceptions though, but in general, it's really something Germans expect. If you agree upon meeting at 2 p.m., you should be there at 2 p.m. at latest. A lot of people will be there way earlier, actually. So that's something you should keep in mind, definitely. Already mentioned that, well insured, right? Some other possibilities, unemployment, bicycle, car, life, and so on. Swimming also available. Another stereotype, Germans love to drink beer. Well, we have over 1,300 breweries in Germany. More than 5,000 different brands of beer. Nowadays, actually a lot of big companies behind, so it's just a label branding thingy. But hey, we have law which ingredients are allowed in beer, so they can actually call it beer. So yeah, at least we have a cultural history with beer, let's say. And it's also the way that, for example, Tsingtao, China's second largest beer producer, was built by Germans. So we're also exporting our techniques, brewery and whatever across the world as well. And because at least a lot of Germans are very proud of the beer and the brewery. A lot of people nowadays even brew their beer at home, but then in very strange combinations, sometimes hard. Okay, no time for the quiz anymore, right? Can I have 5 minutes? 5 minutes more. Okay. Situation. So, Gloria meets her German friend, Stefan, cafe. So, you can read that on your own, of course. I'll just repeat that. While chatting, Stefan had a look at her necklace. When Gloria asked him if he liked it, Stefan told her that the necklace was of low quality and that he did not like it too much. Gloria felt humiliated by his responsive and was surprised by Stefan's offensive statement. What do you think is true? Have a wild guess. All of it, okay. Definitely D, okay. I'd say there is not, first of all, there is not always the answer, of course, in the questionnaire. It might be actually the case that all of that is true, definitely, depending on the personal situation of Stefan. Quite common is that someone wants to impress someone else by judging about something, right? So I know a lot about jewelry and whatever, and this is of low quality. That's actually try to impress someone with your knowledge, even though it's a really bad idea to do it in that way. Unmanly depends. That's the very individual thing, so that's not the common answer. Honesty is definitely something that many Germans keep very high in their attitude. So sometimes they just are honest because we are friends and I have to be honest and whatever. Okay, thanks. The last one is definitely not true for a lot of people. It might be true for some very specific people, but not in general. Okay, so Jesse started to talk to Germans in German. Almost every time they answer in English. That's something international students will encounter a lot, most likely. Or they will actually receive the question, should we switch to English, right? And you actually want to improve your German, right? So that's the situation. Why do you think that Germans talk in English so often or offer to talk in English in such situations? Do they always want to practice their English skills? Do they want to indicate that the German skills of the opposite side is definitely not good and needs to be improved? Do we just need to show our superiority? Or do we want to reduce difficulties in understanding? What do you think? Educated guess, someone? D, okay, D. Yes. So, I mean, D, yes, of course, right? So that's a common thing because Germans think they can talk English. So, yeah. On the other hand, it's also, at least it holds true for a lot of people, practicing as well. So, I mean, it's practice for us as well, right? But yeah, definitely D is the most common answer for that. Yeah, yeah. Italian, French, Spanish, whatever. No, it's just holding true for English, whatsoever. Okay, we are not doing that. Okay, I answered that. Okay, what's the most popular drink in Germany? What do you think? It's defined, I think for the slide, it's defined just as a personal answer. People have been asked, so what's your popular drink? So what's the drink you fancy the most, actually? Not how much liters do you drink per day or whatever, right? So, but which drink are you fancying most? What do you think? Coffee. Coffee? True, coffee. It's coffee. It's because we're worldwide known for our for our good coffee. Coffee. Oh, that's a more practical thing. How much should you tip in a restaurant? And that's a cultural difference, definitely, because in many countries the tip is included, right? Already. Not in Germany. So, what do you think? How much should you tip? And that's actually not easy for the Germans to answer as well sometimes. It depends on what? True. Thanks. You can use your tip as a communication for example, how good was the service? Did I like the food or the drinks? And so on and so forth. So it actually really depends on the purpose. Let's say everything was okay. Fair enough. No, not the 15%. It's actually what's recommended is 5 to 10 of the bill. Exactly. Yeah. So you will encounter a lot of people in restaurants and bars and pubs and whatever when it comes down to paying, sitting there. One in mind. What happens sometimes is they calculate in the wrong way, specifically if they're drunk. Happened to me when I was very young, a little drunk, and then I paid, and I just said, make it 50. And afterwards it came to me, have I just paid 15 euros tip? Wait. So probably calculated in advance. All right. Is there anything else? Oh yeah. What's good hint, thanks. So in a bakery, for example, it's not common to give a tip, but in restaurants and also sometimes in pubs, bars and whatever, in restaurants it's really common. It's almost expected, let's say, right? Besides, it was awful, for example. Or it's McDonald's, genau. I wouldn't count McDonald's onto restaurants, actually. Why are people knocking on the table in meetings? Oh. Any idea? Yeah, sure, of course. It's appreciation. It's not that they want to destroy the table or something, right? It's appreciation. Applause by acclamation, it's called in German university system. That's an applause. A very German type of applauding, actually. Okay, let's stick with that. Unfortunately, I talked way too much in advance. Thanks. If you have any questions on that, ask the locals again. Have a nice day. See you later on, probably in my next talk. Bye.